The other question is, what do you do about what's going on in Liberia and Sierra Leone? Now, I would certainly say absolutely get as many of those field hospitals as you can over there, right? If the U.S. can send 30 or 40, start putting the bureaucratic blowtorch on the European Union, right? Get those Eurogars, get those Eurocrats, get them, if the U.S. can send 40, they should send 50 or 60. We're told that Canada is straining to put 2 in there. 2? Come on, Canada, you can put in 10 or 15. What is that? Australia, if Australia can send fighter jets to bomb ISIS, which is fine with me, but how about a few field hospitals, right? Russia, right? Hey, China, show your newfound economic might, right? So get those facilities in there and send in medical professionals. Many of these would be volunteers, right? Some of them religiously motivated, people with a strong sense of charity. Do that. However, I think at this point there is the question of the asymptomatic carriers, right? Healthy carriers, or apparently healthy, coming from the West African area into the United States. And I would not leave that the way it is now. I would say it is not enough to simply take somebody's temperature and ask them to fill out a questionnaire. I would say at this point you would need to take their temperature and give them, what can I call it? I guess for want of a better word, the El Al treatment. In other words, you know what El Al does to you if you want to fly on their planes?
The Israeli airlines? Yeah, they
give you the third degree practically, right? They question you, they catch you in contradictions and God knows what else. So,
I went to Israel for 6 weeks once, and they gave me an hour interrogation in a back room about why I was trying to come.
I'm afraid that's what it would take, right?
Yeah.
Because the problem is you can get on the plane with no fever, but you're infected, and then when you get, as in the case of Texas, that's exactly what happened, right? The guy flew over, then the symptoms appeared, and then he was diagnosed in the U.S., right, after some of this Keystone Cops stuff. So I'm afraid that you would have to, at this point, at the very least, have the temperature checked and then the El Al treatment. And I think quite soon that may not be enough. At a certain point, I understand the British government today, not a model in my book on most things, but I think the British government today said that they will be stopping all direct flights from London to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and back. And I think that may be the trend also for the U.S. I don't see why that should be taboo. You notice that you're dealing with ideology, right? The Republicans are austerity ghouls. They don't want to pay. Democrats are, what can we call, politically correct, right? They say, oh, no, we can't do that, especially because it's Africa. Well, I'm afraid you have to deal with the hand that you've been given. So I would say future traffic between the United States and West Africa should be done by military charters, right? The Pentagon, they charter jets all the time, right, to take troops around the world, and or military airlift command. In other words, the U.S. has an air force with airlift capabilities. They can ship stuff over, they can take people over, and that will not involve commercial airliners with all the problems involved with that. And you might want to do that some point down the road. You might want to do it immediately. That's very hard for me to judge, but that should not be a taboo. And I'm afraid if you listen carefully to the reasoning why these public health officials say we should not stop commercial flights, their reasoning is not convincing. Their reasoning doesn't take into account the ability of the military, of the government, to fly over the people and equipment that are absolutely necessary to fight the epidemic over there, right, in the forward defense of the United States. I would absolutely do that, but I would do it with military flights and maybe not with commercial ones.
Why would something like this be considered taboo?
Again, the libertarians, because they're hysterical about government activity, and the politically correct because it's Africa.
Right. Okay.
And there's a prima facie assumption of racism, which can also be correct. I mean, I think oftentimes the assumption of racism is correct. It's realistic. It's grows out of experience. But it won't help anybody if Ebola comes to the United States. That's simply, this is the place ultimately where the main effort of humanity to defeat this is going to have to come from the United States, simply because we have at least the remains of an effective New Deal system because you can see what the idea is. It's a question of social surplus, right? You've got to have tremendous resources, logistics in depth. You got to have redundancy. You got to have not one hospital, but 5. You got to have not one isolation room, right, but 20 and more, right? And you got to have the ability to surge that, right, to build them as you need them, and that can mean a great deal, and that can certainly be transported.
Well, we talked about this in the beginning of the show, but the average person is just going to still go back to that. We don't have the money to build it.
What is money? Look,
explain that.
What you're talking about is resources. Do you have trained manpower? As it happens, we do. Most of them are unemployed, but we have people sitting around who can take part in defeating this. We have empty buildings. We have former hospitals. We have all kinds of facilities that could be geared up for these purposes. And we've got the people that we've got about $1.6 billion to $2 billion worth of researchers and laboratories left over from 2013 to 2014 who became unemployed. We could rehire them immediately. Remember,
it seems to me people can't wrap their heads around that. They just say, oh, the budget, it's going to hurt the budget.
But it's off budget. Remember, a central bank can create as much money as it wants. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to put that down the rat hole of speculation? Then you have serious problems. But if you say, I'm going to use this money to move manpower, resources to fight a pandemic and save lives, why, that money is simply your means of shifting resources from one front to another. That's what people don't understand.
It needs to become clear how much we throw down this rat hole. It's not clear to people.
You could easily, you could do it also with a command economy, right? You could have a central state planning authority, commissariat. They could do it too. But the method using the money is actually more efficient, right? Because it means that you don't have to pay attention to so many details, right? You're simply moving resources. And so I would simply say to people, this is philosophical, economical, historical, practical all at once. If you want to live, you've got to take what I'm telling you seriously. You've got to essentially say, I will not vote for a candidate that advocates genocidal austerity and killer cuts. I just won't. As a matter of fact, I'll mobilize to stop them. And naturally, I recommend people in California, in Nebraska, in other states, right? Look at the Tax Wall Street candidates, Tax Wall Street Democrat, Tax Wall Street.
James Hinton for Congress.
James Hinton in Napa and Sonoma, 5th District of California. And, of course, Dan Berdoff, a very fine candidate in Nebraska. You're going to have to write him in on the ballot. But it's worth it. You want to send them a message. You want a protest vote that gives you the most bang for the buck.
Write Dan in.
These guys, and lo and behold, they might even win. Who knows? That you never know.
DanForNebraska.com.
Dan for Nebraska.
Or run yourself.
And get ready to run yourself, yes, because let George do it is not going to work, right? Eventually it's going to come down to, if not now, when? And if not you, who? The old SDS motto from the 60s and 70s. I think get active or get radioactive, right? The other, I guess, would be get active or get Ebola positive.
Okay, we're running out of time. Do you want to wrap up with a couple words, Webster?
It's a brutal and scary situation, right? And this could change very, very rapidly. Again, I don't want to disparage Anthony Fauci and the people who work at the NIH because I value and appreciate what they do. But we also have to factor in these are public officials, and they cannot speculate about what might soon happen. Right? They can't do that because that might get people very upset, and it might cause disorder. But it seems to me the U.S. system is fine in terms of the first line of defense. It's excellent, but it has no depth. And 3.05 hospital beds per 1,000. That is pathetic. That is totally inadequate.
Yeah.
In a world where Japan is up there with 13 plus, Russia 9 plus, Germany 8 plus, it's not enough. So I think we have to
and to listen with a jaundiced ear when you hear all these radio hosts saying that a quarantine facility is really a FEMA death camp to put you in that you need to shoot your way out of.
Of course, there's no money to be made with a reasoned argument recommending competent policies, right? The way you make money in this fallen world of ours is you get out there and shoot your mouth off and spread panic if you can. And of course, it's always it's a FEMA death camp. And by the way, buy some product from my sponsor. Here's a word from my sponsor to sell you something. Right?
The anti-Ebola water filter,
anti-Ebola filters, or whatever they have. Right. Mm-hmm. This is where the most brutal realities of politics kick in, and the main political issues are always life or death. You want to die in a nuclear war? You want to die in a pandemic? Those are the big questions. And that is where you see the vanity of things like campaign finance reform or other process reforms, or what we've just seen in Scotland, right? The ultimate process reform, I guess, is secession, right? The idea that you'd be, instead of having English, Welsh, and Scottish oligarchs and bankers run Scotland, it should be only Scottish oligarchs and bankers should run Scotland. And I'm very glad that they had the sense to say, no, that doesn't solve anything. So there's an element of good sense. Maybe it shows that humanity is not lost, that people might not be so stupid that they can't survive in the world. But there really is a question. Is the human race as presently constituted so stupid that it can't survive? That's an open question. I invite you to answer that we can survive by throwing off the cloak of stupidity at every turn.
Well, we'll help in our small way. We're out of time for tonight. Thank you so much again for Webster for joining us. You've been listening to UCY.tv. Yeah, I'm taking my vitamins. You've been listening to UCY.tv United Front Radio. Have a blessed evening.